Why Iblis is different from the Christian devil. When most people hear the word devil, they picture the Christian Satan, a fallen angel who rebelled against God, waged war in heaven, and now rules a fiery underworld. But in Islam, Iblis is nothing like that. He's not God's rival. He's not a co-equal force of evil. Instead, he operates in the shadows, whispering doubts, stirring temptations, and pulling people off the straight path. His power doesn't come from fighting God, it comes from exploiting human weakness. This distinction is crucial. In Christianity, Satan often represents open rebellion against the divine. In Islam, Iblis is arrogance personified, the one who refused God's command to bow before Adam because he believed fire was nobler than clay. His defiance wasn't a cosmic revolution, it was a single act of pride. And rather than being cast into a separate kingdom, he was allowed to roam the earth until Judgment Day, deceiving mortals with his whispers. That's what makes Iblis unique. He doesn't compete with God. He tests humanity. His story isn't about power against heaven, but about pride, temptation, and the everyday struggle of faith.
The meaning behind his names. In Islamic tradition, names carry meaning, and Iblis is no exception. His most common title is Al-Shaytan, literally the adversary. It's the same root as the Hebrew Satan, meaning opponent or accuser. But the Quran also gives him the personal name Iblis, a word whose origins are debated. Some scholars connect it to the Greek diablos, the source of our English devil and diabolical. Others suggest an Arabic root meaning to despair or to confuse. Either way, the name sets him apart from the ordinary shayateen or devils he commands. Another nickname you'll often hear is Al-Waswasa al-Khannas, the lurking whisperer. This phrase appears in the Quran itself, capturing his signature tactic. He plants subtle thoughts, doubts, and sinful desires in the hearts of humans, then vanishes into hiding. The Arabic word for these whispers, waswasa, even sounds like a hiss. These titles remind us that Iblis's danger lies not in brute force, but in suggestion. He doesn't overpower humans with violence. He corrodes their thoughts, inflates their pride, and manipulates their choices, all through the power of names and whispers.
The whisper trick. If there's one move Iblis is famous for, it's the whisper. The Quran describes him as one who whispers into the hearts of mankind, and Muslim tradition expands on this with countless stories of how he manipulates daily life. These whispers don't arrive with thunder. They slip in quietly, suggesting pride, envy, lust, or hatred. One hadith gives a striking example. A man overslept and missed the dawn prayer. The Prophet Muhammad explained that Satan urinated in his ears. This vivid metaphor shows that missing prayer isn't framed as mere laziness. It's seen as the effect of satanic interference. Another report describes Iblis jumbling a person's words during prayer so it doesn't count, or making them doubt whether they've already prayed. What's crucial here is that Iblis doesn't force sin. He creates confusion, distraction, and doubt, subtle psychological tricks that lead people to stumble. His battlefield isn't the heavens or the underworld, it's the human mind.
Who are the shayateen? When people imagine devils, they often picture horned demons with red skin and pitchforks. But in Islam, the reality is much subtler and scarier. Iblis is said to command an army of shayateen, plural of shaitan, but these aren't a separate species. They can either be jinn, supernatural beings created from smokeless fire, or even human beings who openly oppose God's path. The Quran itself says that shayateen may come from among mankind and jinn, which means devilishness isn't about physical form, but about rebellion and corruption.
A tyrant who spreads injustice or a manipulator who leads others astray can be just as much a devil as any unseen spirit. This way of thinking reframes the struggle against evil. It's not only about resisting invisible forces whispering in the dark, but also recognizing human devils in everyday life, leaders who deceive, people who tempt others into sin, or influencers who distort truth. Iblis may be the archetype, but his shayateen are everywhere. That's why Muslims traditionally recite the ta'awudh, I seek refuge in God from the accursed devil, before prayer, reading Qur'an, or starting important tasks. It's a conscious act of resistance against both unseen whispers and visible corruption.
Refusing to bow. The most famous moment in Iblis' story is also the simplest. God creates Adam from clay, breathes life into him, and commands the angels to bow. All obey except Iblis. He declared, I am better than him. You created me from fire, while you created him from clay. This pride sealed his fate. God expelled him, cursed him, and condemned him to eventual punishment. Yet, before leaving, Iblis asked for something unusual: time. He begged to be allowed to live until the day of resurrection. God agreed, and in that moment, Iblis declared his mission: to mislead humanity, to corrupt all but God's most faithful servants. The meaning here is profound. Unlike in Christian tradition, where Satan's rebellion is militarized and dramatic, the Quran portrays Iblis as prideful, stubborn, and ultimately short-sighted. His sin wasn't ambition to be like God, it was arrogance toward humanity. By refusing to bow, Iblis revealed that evil often begins not with great wars or violent acts, but with a single moment of prideful disobedience.
Jewish and Christian parallel. A Coptic Christian text from 4th century Egypt describes the same scenario. God crowns Adam, the angels are told to bow, but Satan refuses out of pride. These parallels suggest the story of a proud being refusing to honor humanity was circulating in the Near East long before Islam emerged. If true, the word Iblis may be a linguistic bridge between Jewish, Christian, and Islamic understandings of evil. The Quran doesn't copy these stories wholesale. Instead, it reshapes them. By placing Iblis in dialogue with Adam, it makes his defiance not just about pride, but about the eternal struggle between human free will and divine command.
Mystical reinterpretations of Iblis as a tragic lover of God. For most Muslims, Iblis is the archetype of arrogance and sin. But in Islamic mysticism, especially among early Sufis, some thinkers saw his story very differently. Take the famous mystic Al-Hallaj, who was executed in the 10th century for controversial teachings. He argued that Iblis wasn't proud at all. He was devoted. His refusal to bow before Adam wasn't arrogance, but loyalty. In his eyes, God alone was worthy of worship, and bowing to a created being would have been shirk, associating partners with God. This radical view painted Iblis not as the enemy of monotheism, but as its most extreme defender. He loved God so absolutely that he was willing to be cursed for eternity rather than bow to anyone else. Later mystics expanded this idea, suggesting that even Iblis's role as tempter is part of God's design, a way of testing believers and separating the faithful from the corrupt. Of course, these interpretations were never mainstream. They were condemned as heretical, and thinkers like Al-Hallaj paid the price. But they reveal the richness of Islamic thought. Even the devil story became a canvas for exploring love, loyalty, and the mystery of divine will.
Folklore. Iblis as muse of poetry, music, and art. Beyond theology, Iblis also lives in Muslim folklore, not only as a tempter, but strangely as a patron of creativity. Early Arab poets sometimes invoked him directly. The famous poet Abu Nuwas, known for verses about wine and forbidden love, once called Iblis his uncle and poetic muse.
In popular imagination, he was the one who whispered rebellious lines, encouraging poets to push boundaries and mock convention. Legends also tie Iblis to music. In the 1001 Nights, the legendary musician Ibrahim al-Mausili was said to have studied under Iblis himself, receiving otherworldly skill from the devil. This echoes older pre-Islamic beliefs that Jinn inspired poets and musicians, much like the Greek daimons who whispered ideas to artists. So while folklore cast Iblis as a mischievous muse, revelation had to be clearly separated from those whispers. Here, Iblis isn't just a corrupter, he's a reminder of art's dangerous, intoxicating power.
The big theological lesson: free will, evil, and why God allows Iblis to exist. The most unsettling part of Iblis's story is that God lets him continue. After his defiance, Iblis asks to live until the day of resurrection so he can mislead humanity. God grants the request. Why? If God is all-powerful, why allow evil to exist at all? Islamic tradition answers with a hard truth. Evil is not beyond God's control. It exists by his permission. The Quran says God has appointed enemies for every prophet, both human and jinn, as a way of testing people. In other words, Iblis is not God's rival, but God's instrument. His whispers expose the proud, the greedy, and the corrupt, while those who resist his tricks prove their faith. This turns Iblis into more than just a villain. He embodies the tension between divine will and human choice. He reminds us that free will is only meaningful when temptation is real. His whispers are not excuses, but challenges. Every person decides whether to follow them or not. In the end, Iblis is both enemy and mirror. He is the voice of pride and rebellion within us, and the proof that faith requires resistance.